What if the man terrorizing you in your own home didn't actually own a single brick of it? For 4 years, Renata Cole flinched every time her husband's car pulled into the driveway. She thought she had nothing. No money of her own, no way out, no one coming. She was wrong on every count. And the man who proved it would walk through her front door holding a folder that would end her husband's world. To their neighbors in the maple-lined cul-de-sacs of Lake Minnetonka, Minnesota, Renata and Grant Cole looked like a postcard. Grant sold luxury boats to men with more money than sense, and he had the tan, the watch, and the laugh to match. Renata had been a set designer before the wedding. Sharp, funny, the kind of woman who noticed details nobody else did. After the wedding, Grant noticed that quality too, and decided it needed to be controlled. It started with the house. Grant insisted Renata quit her job to focus on their future, and within a year the future looked like a 5-bedroom, colonial on Fawn Lake Drive. Paid for, Grant told everyone. Out of his own pocket, every cent. He said it at dinner parties. He said it to her face during arguments, like a trump card. My name, my house, my rules. The rules multiplied. No credit cards in her name. No lunches with her old co-workers. Grant called them a bad influence, a tracking app on her phone that he called for her safety after she was 5 minutes late from the grocery store once. When she pushed back, the anger came out sideways at first, slammed cabinets, a wine glass thrown near her feet, never quite at her. Then, 18 months in, it stopped being near. She learned to read the weather in his shoulders before he said a word. She learned which excuses would satisfy the pharmacist when she needed something for the bruising on her arm. She learned to disappear inside her own home so thoroughly that some mornings she wasn't sure she was still in there at all. What Renata didn't know, what Grant had buried under 4 years of lies, was that the house on Fawn Lake Drive had never belonged to him, not for one single day. Grant's boat dealership was hemorrhaging money. 2 bad seasons, a warehouse lease he couldn't cover, and a habit of borrowing from the business account to fund the watch. Collection had left him quietly, catastrophically underwater. He'd taken a private loan from a man named Victor, Ash to keep the lights on, the kind of loan you don't advertise, with the kind of interest that compounds if you're even a week late. Grant was 3 weeks late. On a gray Thursday evening in October, Renata was in the kitchen when Grant's car screamed into the driveway too fast. Gravel spraying. She knew before he opened the door. He came in already shouting, phone in his fist. Veins standing out on his neck. Something about the bank freezing an account. Something about Ash's people calling the dealership directly. He grabbed the stack of mail off the counter and hurled it across the room when he didn't find whatever he was looking for. Where's the deed paperwork? The house file. Where is it? I don't know what you're talking about, Grant. He crossed the kitchen in 2 steps. What happened next took less than a minute and left. Renata on the tile floor with a split lip and her ears ringing. Grant standing over her, breathing hard, already looking almost as frightened as she was. He wasn't just angry. He was drowning and he needed somewhere to put his hands. That's when someone knocked on the front door. Not the doorbell, a knock. 3 slow, deliberate raps that carried through the whole downstairs. Grant went still. Nobody used that door. Delivery drivers used the side entrance. Neighbors called first. And the gate at the end of their private drive required a code. Grant Cole, a woman's voice said through the door, calm and unhurried. I know you're home. I'd like 5 minutes. Grant wiped his face, straightened his shirt, and opened the door on a stranger he didn't recognize. A woman in her 60s in a plain. Gray coat, silver hair pinned back, holding a slim leather folder like it weighed nothing and everything at once. 2 other people waited by a black sedan at the curb, a young man with a camera bag, and an older man in a windbreaker with a county badge clipped to his belt. Mrs. Odell, the woman said, extending a hand Grant didn't take. I represent the estate of Harold Whitfield. I believe you've heard the name. Grant's face drained of color. Renata, still on the floor behind him, had never heard the name in her life. But she watched her husband, a man who never lost his composure in front of strangers, take an actual step backward. This isn't a good time, Grant said. It's the only time, Mrs. Odell replied. You've missed 4 notices, Mr. Cole. Certified mail, all 4. I assume you didn't share them with your wife. Her eyes moved past him, into the house, and found Renata on the kitchen floor. Something in the older woman's expression didn't soften into pity. It sharpened into something closer to resolve. Ma'am, she said to Renata directly, stepping past Grant without waiting for permission. My name is Constance Odell. I'm an attorney, and I have some information about this house that I think you're entitled to hear before anyone says another word. Grant found his voice. This is my house. I bought it. I don't know who put you up to this. You didn't buy it. Mr. Cole. Constance opened the folder and laid a single document on the kitchen island, out of the spilled mail and broken glass. This house was purchased in 2019 by Harold Whitfield in trust, for the sole benefit of his goddaughter, Renata Ann Whitfield Cole, your wife. The deed was placed in a revocable trust that converted to her outright ownership 18 months ago, on the 4th anniversary of the purchase per the trust terms. You've been living, and apparently borrowing against, a house that has belonged entirely to your wife since last spring. The room went silent except for the tick of the kitchen clock. Renata pulled herself up against the counter, staring at the paper. Harold Whitfield, her mother's oldest friend, a quiet widower who used to send her a card every birthday without fail, who died 2 years ago and whose funeral Grant had, refused to let her attend, because it wasn't a good time for the business. She remembered Harold's kind, watery eyes at her college graduation, the only person in the family section who'd shown up. She had thought, in the fog of the last 4 years, that she had no one left. Harold had made sure that wasn't true. She just hadn't been told. That's fraud, Grant said, his voice climbing. Nobody buys a house for their goddaughter without... He absolutely can, Constance cut in, unbothered. And he did, because your wife's late mother asked him to, in case her daughter ever needed a place that couldn't be taken from her. Harold was very specific with his attorney. That would be me, about what should happen if a husband ever tried to use this property as collateral for a debt that wasn't his to leverage. She glanced at the man in the windbreaker by the curb, which is what you did 3 weeks ago, Mr. Cole, when you used this address to secure a loan from a man named Victor Ashe. County records show the lien, filing. Mr. Ashe's people have already been in contact with my office, since the collateral he was promised was never legally yours to offer. Grant's mouth opened. Nothing came out. You have no claim to this house, Constance said, quiet and final. You never did. Everything in it, the walls, the deed, the ground it sits on, belongs to the woman bleeding on her own kitchen floor because you decided her silence was owed to you. I'd start thinking very hard, Mr. Cole, about how you're going to explain to Mr. Ashe that his collateral just evaporated, because I don't think he'll be nearly as patient with you as I've been. The deputy by the car, there for exactly this possibility, Constance later admitted, stepped in when he saw the split lip and the way Grant flinched at his wife's silence, like a man realizing the debt he actually owed had just come due. Grant didn't spend the night in the house on Fawn Lake Drive again. Between the assault report, the fraud his creditors' attorneys were already circling, and a trust document that made him nothing more than an unwelcome guest in a home he'd bragged about owning for 4 years. There wasn't a lawyer alive who could put him back in that kitchen. Renata sat with Constance at the island an hour later, the mail still scattered across the floor, an ice pack against her jaw, and read through pages she hadn't known existed. A letter Harold had written her, sealed until the trust converted, in handwriting she recognized instantly. I couldn't watch what he was doing to you and say nothing, but I also couldn't fight your battles for you while I was living, so I did the next best thing. I made sure that whenever you were ready, you'd have solid ground to stand on. It was always yours, sweetheart. You just had to outlast him. She cried for the first time in longer than she could remember. Not from fear, but from the strange, disorienting relief of realizing the walls around her had been hers, quietly, this entire time. 8 months later, the boat dealership was gone, sold off in pieces to cover Grant's debts. The fraud charges from the false collateral were still working their way through court, and Victor Ashe's attorneys were, by all accounts, considerably less forgiving than Constance Odell had ever been. Renata repainted the kitchen a soft, unapologetic yellow. She hung Harold's photograph by the front door, the one door in the house that for 4 years she had learned to dread, and that now, finally, only ever brought her people who were on her side. She kept the deed framed in her study, not out of vanity, as a reminder that even in the years she'd felt like she owned nothing, not her time, not her choices, not even her own face in the mirror, she had, in fact, owned the ground under her feet the entire time. She just hadn't been told. If Renata's story hit you right in the chest, hit that like button and let us know. Subscribe and turn on notifications so you never miss the next story of quiet. Just as catching up with the people who thought they'd gotten away with everything. And drop a comment. If you found out the house was never really theirs, what's the first thing you'd change?